I always believed a mother's love could survive anything, even betrayal, even heartbreak. But nothing prepared me for the moment. My own son, my flesh and blood, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You need to leave. This house isn't yours anymore." I felt the air leave my lungs. The house I worked 2 jobs to pay off. The home where I raised him, tucked him into bed, held his hand through every heartbreak, scraped knee, and fevered night. He stood there, taller than I, remembered, his arms crossed like a landlord talking to a delinquent tenant. And I was the delinquent. It started small, of course. That's how betrayal always does. Quiet, like a slow leak under the floorboards. You don't notice it until everything's rotting. 3 years ago, my son, Eric, hit a rough patch. His wife left him, he lost his job. And with nowhere else to turn, he came to me, his mother. I didn't hesitate. I welcomed him home. I cleared out the guest room, cooked his favorite meals, and offered him the comfort I thought only a mother could give. For a while, it was fine. He helped out a bit around the house, kept to himself mostly. I didn't ask questions. I figured he needed time. Then he stopped looking for work, stopped helping, started treating the house like it was his personal space, and I was just some annoying roommate. The dynamic shifted slowly, like an invisible tide pulling me under before I knew how far I'd drifted. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare me for what he did next. One chilly Tuesday afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and noticed something strange. The locks had been changed. At first, I thought I had the wrong keys. I stood there, fumbling, confused, maybe even a little dazed. Then I saw Eric through the window, sitting on the couch, eyes glued to his phone. I knocked. He didn't move. I knocked harder. Finally, he came to the door, sighed like I was an inconvenience, and opened it just enough to talk through the gap. "You can't just change the locks," I said, my voice trembling but stern. His response was ice cold. "You're not on the title, Mom. You signed the deed over to me last year for legal reasons, remember? It's my house now." That's when it hit me. Last year, during a health scare, he convinced me it would be safer to transfer the house to his name. To avoid probate, he said. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Nothing changes." He lied. He manipulated me when I was vulnerable. He wrapped betrayal in concern and smiled as he stabbed me in the back. I stood there on the porch, holding bags of groceries I bought with my own money, in tears, while my son, my child, told me I no longer had a place in the home I built with my own hands. In that moment, something in me shattered, but something else, something stronger, began to rise. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply looked him in the eyes and said, "You'll regret this, Eric. One day, you'll understand exactly what you've done." He smirked and shut the door. What he didn't realize was that he hadn't pushed me out. He'd lit a fire under me. He might have thought I was weak, too trusting, too old to fight back. But he was wrong. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, I sat in my car, parked down the street from the house that used to be mine, watching the windows glow with the lights I once paid for. My fingers gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was too stunned to cry, too numb to feel the cold creeping through the cracked window. How did we get here? I thought back to all the moments I had tried to protect Eric. When his father left us, Eric was only 6. I worked doubles for years, skipped meals so he could eat, skipped vacations so he could have birthday parties. Every decision I ever made, every sacrifice, was with him in mind. Now, he had turned my love into a weapon, used my trust like a tool to steal the one thing I had left, my home. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, manipulation, a deliberate act of cruelty wrapped in legal language and false affection. I didn't want to believe it at first. I went back to my friend Carla's house where she had agreed to let me stay temporarily, and pulled out the documents Eric had me sign last year. I kept them in a file marked Health Directives in my bedroom drawer. He said it was to protect the house in case anything happened to me. "Just a precaution, Mom," he had said, smiling. "I'll take care of it for you." But there it was, right in front of me. I had signed over the deed. His name was the only one listed on the property now. The paper trail was clear, neat, legal, cold. Carla hovered in the kitchen, watching me flip through the pages with trembling hands. "You're telling me he changed the locks? On you?" she asked, her voice rising. I nodded slowly. "He said I don't live there anymore, that it's his house now." Her face twisted in disgust. "That's sick. That's your home. He grew up in that house." I didn't respond. My throat was tight. I felt humiliated. I had built my life around the belief that love, real love, meant giving everything. Now I was realizing how blind that made me. Eric wasn't interested in repairing his life. He wasn't struggling. He was scheming. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. He stopped contributing to groceries months ago. He forgot to pay utilities and would guilt-trip me when I reminded him. He always talked about wanting independence, about needing space and ownership, but it never occurred to me that meant my space, my ownership. Then came the excuses. Why he couldn't find work, why he couldn't move out, why I should let him manage things financially. I gave him everything, and he took it as permission to take even more. Worse yet, he started, telling relatives that I was struggling mentally, that I was forgetful, that I needed help managing my affairs. I brushed it off at first, assuming he was just trying to explain why he moved back in. But now I saw the truth. He wasn't just stealing my house. He was laying the groundwork to make me look unstable, to discredit me, in case I pushed back. That realization stung more than anything. My own son had orchestrated a slow, methodical takeover of my life. I was angry, hurt, devastated. But underneath all that, I was waking up. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was seeing the manipulation, the gaslighting, the calculated way he'd isolated me. And I knew one thing for sure. He didn't get this far by being stupid. He thought I was weak, helpless, that I'd roll over and vanish quietly. But he had underestimated the one thing he couldn't steal from me, my will. He might have thought he won, that he had finally claimed his freedom by throwing me out like trash. But I was about to show him exactly what a mistake that was. I woke up the next morning on Carla's couch, stiff from the awkward position and the weight of everything on my shoulders. I wasn't just grieving a betrayal. I was mourning the life I thought I still had. My house wasn't just a building with walls and a roof. It was the result of 30 years of sacrifice. I bought it after my divorce, scraped together every down payment, refinanced during the lean years, patched up the plumbing myself when money was tight. That house was my independence. It was the one thing no one had ever been able to take from me, until now. And the person who took it was my son. The emotional wound was one thing, but the practical impact, that cut deeper. I had nowhere else to go. My retirement savings weren't substantial. I still worked part-time at the library, mostly for insurance and a little extra money. But I couldn't afford rent in our area. The market had skyrocketed in recent years, and there was no way I could just pick up and find a new home. Not at this stage of my life. He knew that. That's what made it worse. Eric knew I was financially vulnerable. He knew that house was my safe haven, my security. And he still used that knowledge against me. It wasn't just a cruel act. It was calculated. I kept thinking about how easily he had done it. How he smiled and joked and brought me tea the day I signed the transfer forms. "This is just so we can make sure everything's smooth if anything ever happens to you," he'd said. "It's all about protecting the house." No, it was about stealing it. If I let this go, I'd be setting a dangerous precedent, not just for myself, but for every parent who gives and gives, thinking that love and loyalty will protect them. I had thought about my granddaughter, Eric's daughter, Emily. She was just 10 years old, and even though I didn't see her often due to the messy custody issues between Eric and his ex, I adored her. I thought about the example I'd be setting if I let this happen without a fight. What kind of legacy would I leave behind? That betrayal doesn't have consequences. That you can strip someone of their dignity and still sleep at night? That blood excuses everything? No, I wasn't going to allow that. Because this wasn't just about reclaiming a house. This was about reclaiming myself. All my life I had been the caregiver, the fixer, the one who made everything okay. And for the longest time I thought that was enough. That if I just loved hard enough, gave enough, things would work out. But what Eric had done? That wasn't a misunderstanding. That wasn't a lapse in judgment. That was greed. That was calculated betrayal. And I couldn't let it stand. Not just for me, but for every parent who'd ever been used, for every woman who had been pushed out of the life she built by people she thought she could trust. It mattered because it was my story now, and I was going to rewrite it on my terms. As I sat with Carla at her tiny breakfast table, coffee in hand, I told her the truth. "I'm not going to just disappear," I said. "He thinks he's won, but I'm going to fight back. I don't know how yet, but I will take back what's mine." She looked at me, eyes wide. "Are you sure? He's your son?" I nodded. "He was my son, but now he's just a thief in a familiar face." And with that, I stood up, steadied myself, and took the first breath of a new beginning. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry, and I was ready. Revenge wasn't the word for what I wanted. What I wanted was justice. But justice isn't something you can shout into the wind and expect to hear an answer. It's slow, it's calculated, and it's best served by the patient and prepared. So, I got to work. The first thing I did was call an attorney, someone who specialized in elder financial abuse. Yes, that's what it was called. I hadn't even known the term until Carla said it out loud, but once she did, it all clicked. What Eric did wasn't just immoral. In the eyes of the law, it might actually be illegal. The lawyer, her name was Melanie Ruiz, listened to my story carefully. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She'd heard stories like mine before. "You're not the first mother this has happened to," she said gently. "But if what you're saying is true, and you can prove it, there may be a path forward." That was the key. Proof. Eric had covered his tracks pretty well. On paper, I had signed everything over willingly. The documents were notarized. There were no threats, no visible coercion. But that's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't leave bruises. It leaves silence, regret, paper trails disguised as protection. Melanie helped me identify what we'd need. Text messages and emails where Eric had convinced me it was for my safety. Witnesses, like Carla, who could testify that Eric had taken over the house and changed the locks while I was gone. Evidence of his pattern, statements, recordings, anything that showed how he talked about me behind my back or how he managed my finances under false pretenses. Character testimony from family and friends about my mental clarity. Important if he tried to claim I was confused or unstable when I signed the documents. We weren't going to undo the deed with feelings. We needed facts, patterns, intent. I spent hours digging through old messages, printed off bank statements, and made a list of everything I'd paid for in that house over the past year, even after he technically owned it. The power bill, the groceries, the maintenance. I documented everything. Then I opened a new bank account, changed my direct deposits, made sure that if he had access to anything tied to me, it was immediately severed. And most importantly, I stopped contacting him. That was the hardest part, because even after everything he had done, there was still this small aching part of me that wanted to call, to scream, to cry, to ask why. But I didn't, because I knew he wouldn't give me an answer I could live with. This wasn't about fixing a relationship anymore. This was about restoring my life. Melanie told me to be patient. This kind of case takes time, she warned. It's not like the movies. You don't get a big reveal and instant justice in a single courtroom scene. But we can fight this. And I believed her. I also started speaking to a therapist. Carla had nudged me toward it, saying I needed someone objective to help me process the emotional fallout. And she was right. Because underneath the anger and betrayal, there was shame. Shame that I had let it happen. Shame that I didn't see it coming. But slowly, I began to understand something that changed everything. This wasn't my failure. This was his choice, his manipulation, his betrayal. And now it was time for him to face it. I wasn't powerless. I had the truth on my side. And even if it took months, years, I would make sure the courts, our family, and most importantly, Eric, saw that truth for what it was. Because he might have taken the deed. But I was about to take back the narrative. Once, I had a clear plan with Melanie. It was time to move from shock to strategy. The first step was building the timeline. I pulled out an old spiral notebook and started from the beginning. When Eric first moved back in. I logged dates, events, even seemingly small details like when he stopped paying for food or when he first suggested the deed transfer. At first, it felt tedious, but as the story came together on the page, I saw what Melanie meant. Patterns tell the truth when people lie. Next, I dug into the messages. Thank God I never delete texts. I found the one where he asked, "You trust me, right, Mom? This is just a formality for the house." And another where he said, "If anything happens to you, I want to make sure the house doesn't get tied up in court. It's all about protection." I knew exactly what to say. But those words now had another meaning. Evidence of manipulation. Then came the emails. He'd emailed me a copy of the deed transfer before the signing, saying, "Just look it over, but don't stress. I'll walk you through it when we meet with the notary." That was important. He deliberately downplayed the seriousness of the document. Melanie said that could help demonstrate how he misrepresented the situation. After that, I started contacting people. First, Carla. She was more than ready to write a statement. She had seen how Eric had treated me, how he slowly took over, how he changed the locks without warning. He was cold about it, like he was getting rid of a squatter, not his mother, she said. Then I reached out to my sister and 2 close friends who had visited me over the past year. All of them remembered me talking about how Eric promised the deed transfer was temporary. One of them even had a voice recording from a family dinner where Eric joked, "She still thinks she owns the place, even though my name's on it. Classic, Mom." He'd said it with a laugh, but it was damning. Melanie's paralegal helped me collect everything. Messages, dates, statements, and even utility bills I'd continued to pay after the transfer. The most powerful piece of evidence came when I pulled my bank records and showed that I was still covering the mortgage payments and repairs after he officially owned the house. "You've been treated like a tenant without rights," Melanie said. But the paper trail shows something more. A woman still investing in the house while her son slowly pushed her out. She explained the strategy. We'd begin by filing a civil suit for elder financial abuse and fraudulent inducement. It wouldn't get the house back overnight, but it could stop him from selling it or evicting me further. More importantly, it would force him to face accountability, and if the court ruled in our favor, the deed could be reversed or voided entirely. But there was more. We filed a lice pendens, a legal notice attached to the property title, alerting any future buyers or lenders that the house was part of ongoing litigation. That move stunned Eric. A few days later, I got a call. From him. His voice was clipped, irritated. "What are you doing? You're blowing this way out of proportion." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You started this when you locked me out. Now I'm just making sure you answer for it." Then I hung up. Melanie said that was the first of many reactions to come. People like Eric, who manipulate behind the scenes, panic when the spotlight finds them. He was used to me being quiet, passive, forgiving. Now, I was fighting smart. I also posted a private message to our extended family group chat, something I'd never done before. I didn't blast him. I didn't name-call. I simply wrote, "Some of you may have heard that I'm no longer in my home. What you may not know is that I was manipulated into signing over the deed under false pretenses. I'm pursuing legal action now, and will let the truth speak for itself." I didn't need sympathy. I needed clarity. Let him scramble. Let him try to explain. Because the truth was coming. And it had receipts. By the time we got to court, Eric didn't even look like himself anymore. He showed up in a suit that didn't fit, eyes darting around the room, jaw clenched so tight I could practically hear his teeth grinding. The same son who once called me the strongest woman he knew, now couldn't even meet my eyes. Good. I sat beside Melanie, calm but steady, holding a stack of neatly organized documents that painted a clear picture. One of trust violated, power abused, and a woman who refused to stay silent. The hearing lasted most of the day. Melanie presented our case with surgical precision. She laid out the texts, emails, bank records, and witness statements. She showed how Eric convinced me to sign over my home under the guise of legal safety, then exploited that control to isolate me and force me out. Eric's defense? That I gave him the house willingly, as a gift. But when the judge asked him, "Why then did you continue letting your mother pay for all the utilities, maintenance, and groceries if the house was yours?" He froze. He stammered something about mutual convenience, but it fell flat. And when the court heard the recording of him laughing about how Mom still thinks she owns the place, the judge's tone changed. By the end of the hearing, the judge didn't issue a full ruling, but he granted a temporary injunction preventing Eric from selling or refinancing the property and referred the case for a full trial. But the damage was already done. Eric's face turned red as the judge spoke, his smirk from months ago, the one he wore as he closed the door in my face, was gone. Outside the courtroom, he tried to approach me. I could see the performance starting again, that same soft voice he used when he wanted something. "Mom, come on, this is ridiculous. You're letting some lawyer twist things. We're family." "No," I said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We were family, until you put greed above blood." He stood there, stunned, as I walked away. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. My case moved forward. The court ordered a forensic audit of the financial records and began reviewing the transaction for signs of undue influence. Meanwhile, Eric's reputation started to crumble. Word got out among the family. Truth has a way of surfacing when you stop covering for people. His ex-wife contacted me and thanked me for standing up, for exposing what she dealt with quietly for years. Even Emily, my granddaughter, started asking to visit me more. It didn't erase what happened, but it reminded me that karma isn't always loud. Sometimes it moves in whispers. Reputation lost, bridges burned, isolation earned. Eventually, after months of proceedings, the court ruled in my favor. The judge found that the deed transfer was done under false pretenses, without full understanding or independent legal counsel. The transfer was voided. The title was restored in my name. And just like that, the house was mine again. But I didn't move back right away. I stood in that living room the day the judgment came through, alone, and took it all in. The place was messy, neglected. The energy had shifted. It no longer felt like a sanctuary, but it was mine. Every crooked tile, every crack in the paint, every quiet memory embedded in the walls, and no one could take it from me again. I had the locks changed the next day, this time with keys only in my hands. Eric? He moved in with a friend. Last I heard, he was struggling to find steady work. He sent me a few texts afterward. Apologies. That sounded more like guilt than remorse. I didn't respond. Because closure doesn't always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from boundaries, from survival, from choosing yourself after someone else decided you weren't worth protecting. I share this story not for pity, but for warning. For every parent who thinks unconditional love means sacrificing your dignity. For every person who's been taken advantage of by someone they raised, fed, clothed, and believed in. You are not powerless. You are not crazy. You are not the villain for standing up for yourself. They say karma has a long memory. I say sometimes karma just needs a little help. And now, I sleep with my doors locked, my name back on the deed, and my peace finally restored.